F1 is back once again. It's the Austrian Grand Prix. We're here to make our predictions for what's going to happen around the Red Bull Ring this weekend. Let's get started. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This time out, we are going to be making our predictions for what is going to happen in the Austrian Grand Prix. We're going to be taking a look at our biggest positive surprise, our biggest disappointment, our qualifying top three, our race podium, and then we'll round things out like we always do with our one crazy prediction. Before we get started, if you would do me the greatest honor of leaving a like on the video, it would really help me out trying to grow this little community we have here. And if you feel so inclined at any point in this video, subscribe down below. We're on actually the march towards 300 subs, so for a little just side project I do for fun, it's not doing too bad. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on into this thing, get this party started with our biggest positive surprise. Let's kick things off with our biggest positive surprise, and it's the Red Bull Ring. It's actually one of the more interesting tracks on the circuit from just a conceptual point of view. It's a relatively simple track. It's a lot of straights and not too many corners, and at the end of the day, this one is a power track through and through, so it will be power unit specific. But I think we've actually seen some pretty interesting results from the different power unit manufacturers so far this season, and I think we're actually in for a fairly interesting result here. With that said, my biggest positive surprise for this weekend is Max Verstappen. It feels like Red Bull will benefit from a track that is a lot simpler. Obviously, it's kind of just three straights and then the back half of sector 2 and sector 3, which are really the only corners on the entire track, it seems like. And so this is actually going to be one of those interesting ones where I think a driver is going to make a big difference here. It's going to be about extracting every single millimeter out of the car, out of the track width, and I think Max is due for a solid weekend. We've seen a really up and down season from Max and Red Bull as a whole, and I think it's time we see Max back on the podium once again for one of Red Bull's pseudo home races, obviously around the Red Bull Ring. So I think we'll see Max back on the podium and a solid weekend for the local Dutchman at the Red Bull Ring. If you can call it a home race for Red Bull, which I think you can, I think it's going to be a fun weekend for Red Bull and Max Verstappen. All right, let's move on now to our pick for biggest disappointment this weekend, and I'm going with Franco Colapinto in this one. He's coming off of a P10 finish around Spain, a very solid result for him. A Mercedes powered car that I'm actually going with in a biggest disappointment slot, just because I feel like there's something in the air about the Mercedes power unit over this season so far, and I feel like there's just something in the universe that's pointing me away from the customer teams. And I think Franco Colapinto might be one of those guys who I look at and go, it feels like this is one of those weekends where you'll look up and go, oh wow, I think I'm surprised that Franco's struggling as much as he did. And it's purely, this is one of my vibes picks, which have not always suited me well when it comes to predictions. That I really don't have much else to go on besides the fact that it just feels like Franco is really struggling to extract the same kind of performance out of the Alpine than like Gasly is. Obviously, Gasly is having a fantastic season. Franco's been in the points a couple of times, but definitely not to the heights that we've seen out of Pierre. And this is just one of those weekends where I feel like we'll look up, Pierre will be finishing like P7 and Franco will be mired down well outside the point. So he's welcome to prove me wrong, but this is one of those I'm calling my shot moments where it just feels like there's going to be a few drivers that I feel like have a really bad weekend, whether they want to or not. And I feel like Franco just might be, unfortunately, one of the victims of that. All right, let's move on to qualifying, which is always a treat around the Red Bull Ring. It's one of the faster laps on the F1 calendar, and I think it's going to never disappoint. I am going a little out of the box this time. I think we are gonna do something that I don't believe has been done so far this season. But we're gonna start in P3. My pick for P3 in qualifying this weekend is going to be Lando Norris. McLaren had a very strong Spanish Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri a little less so. Lando Norris ends up getting himself a podium with the retirement of Kimi Antonelli. This feels like one of those situations where McLaren will take advantage of this actually not being a sprint weekend and getting able to set up the car the way they want to. And I think we're due for one of those McLaren weekends where they really look strong, very similar to last weekend, and I think they'll carry a little bit of that momentum forward. And so Lando Norris, I think, is going to be here in P3 on qualifying. Now, as we move on to P2, I'm actually going with the Mercedes of George Russell. This, I think, is going to be a pseudo momentum pick, very similar to my Lando Norris pick. George obviously comes home to finish the Spanish Grand Prix in P2. But that said, while looking like the fastest driver all weekend, when it actually came to the race pace, he actually fell behind Kimi Antonelli. So are we seeing a situation where George might just be more on the one lap pace grind? Who knows? Mercedes obviously have then come out and said they messed up George's pit stop, unsettled the car, and the rest is history. But that said, George has looked at times more on top of the car over a single lap. And I think the Red Bull Ring is one of those circuits where you really can dial in to, getting it down that one lap pace. And I think George is going to try and continue the momentum. I think it'll be a little bit of it's very tenuous spot to be in, but I think it'll be enough for a front row start for George Russell as he continues his bid for a world championship against his sophomore teammate. But he will not take pole position because I am putting pole position. My official 2026 Austrian Grand Prix prediction is Lewis Hamilton to take pole position in Austria. This one is 100% also a momentum pick. Lewis has been on an absolute tear through the grid the last handful of weekends. He's had a lot of strong results back to back to back, and ultimately culminating in a win last time out in Spain. This is one of those instances where, kind of harking back to what I was talking about with my pick for biggest disappointment, there's something in the air and weirdness around Mercedes power units right now that it is giving me a little bit of pause. I think Ferrari have an opportunity, should they accept the opportunity and actually deliver on it, to actually start to creep forward a little bit when it comes to performance gap to Mercedes. It is going to be interesting. I think Lewis is driving with a ton of confidence right now, and his qualifying has really taken a step up when it comes to, how many years in a row did we see when he was finishing his time at Mercedes where he was really struggling in qualifying. It seems like he's gotten a little bit of that pace back, and I, for one, would love nothing more than to see Lewis Hamilton stand atop the grid after qualifying around the Red Bull Ring. So we'll see if it comes true. But that said, I think there's no one on the grid who's carrying more momentum than Lewis Hamilton. So there we go. I have a Hamilton pole position, a George Russell P2, and Lando Norris rounding it out for us. All right, here we are, our race podium for the hills of Austria. It is going to be a fun one. The Austria race is always such an interesting time. It's been a few years since we've seen it without it being a sprint weekend, but I think it still holds a very interesting prospects for us. I think especially with these new regulations, these long straights could lead to some very interesting lead changes, passes, and unexpected moments, and some drama up and down the grid. But let's begin with P3, the bottom step of the podium. I am going with Max Verstappen. I think this is going to be an instance of maybe Red Bull's qualifying, letting them down a little bit, their single lap pace. We have seen Max obviously perform very well in certain instances of qualifying. But when it comes to the power circuits, I think there is still a little bit to be desired out of the Red Bull over a single lap. That said, I do think Red Bull will pull out all the stops to have a very good result here. And I think it will culminate with Max standing on the podium, whether it be due to strategy or potentially just Max doing what Max does and outdriving the performance of that Red Bull. So time will tell, but I think it'll happen. Max, P3, couldn't leave him off the podium in this one. As we're going to move on to P2, I am going with George Russell to finish P2. I think this is going to be a very interesting front row if it were to come true in this fashion. Obviously, we've seen the Ferrari starts have been good, but the rest of the grid has very clearly caught up. But I still think it would be good enough to hold the lead. Now, would it be able to hold the lead is the real question. Obviously, Austria is a very difficult track to, really hold a lead like that, especially with the new straight mode. Obviously being able to be deployed for everyone in the overtake mode, I think is going to be the very interesting thing here. And will the Mercedes power unit be able to power them to a win? Time will tell. But my winner, if you couldn't guess it already, is Lewis Hamilton. I feel like I can never talk about P2 without just also including P1. It's an interesting thing. Maybe I'll have to start flipping those around. Start in pole position and work backwards, who knows. But it's going to be a fun one. If this top 3 in qualifying come true, I think it'll be very interesting. 3 different constructors battling it out for the race lead. I think Hamilton would come out on top of that. And we saw what he was able to do in Spain with clear air and a lot of confidence. If he takes pole position, I can tell you this, that he'll never be more confident in that moment than that race start. So it would be a long time coming. And I think this also has a lot to do with sort of my hesitation when it comes to the Mercedes power unit right now. There's a lot of questions to be asked when it comes to reliability and elsewhere. And it also come out that it really seems like Mercedes might struggle a little bit when it comes to battery deployment and things like that. So time will tell, excuse me, whether or not Lewis is able to hold on to the win, but I'm going to believe that momentum is real and he is carrying so much of it, it's hard to ignore. All right, let's get this weekend started by wrapping up here with our one crazy prediction. And this one I'm actually really excited about because there's something in the air about this. I think it's been something that has been teased a little bit, culminating last time out in Spain. It was oh so close. My one crazy prediction is that Sergio Perez and Cadillac make it out of Q1 for the first time in their history. They were so close in the last couple of weekends, but never closer than last time out in Spain. I think there's something in the air this weekend. I think Austria in the Red Bull Ring is the prime spot for Sergio Perez to continue putting that Cadillac relatively farther up than it might actually deserve. So I think we could see some interesting things happen here. And I think Sergio Perez gets Cadillac their first Q2 appearance in Formula One. I, for one, would love to see it, unless it comes at the expense of one of my drivers, in which I will be furious, but I'll happily take the point anyway. There we have it, guys. We are set with our predictions for this weekend. What do you think is going to happen in the hills of Austria? Let me know down in the comment section below your predictions for this weekend. I'd love to read what you guys think is going to happen. And once again, if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. We will be back when the weekend is all said and done. That said, it will be a scruffy upload. It might be a really quick one because I will actually be on the road traveling this weekend. And so I'll be catching all the F1 as much as I can. And the video after the weekend is over might be very scruffy, but we will cross that bridge when we get there. I hope you enjoy the weekend. Austria is one of my favorites on the calendar, and I hope it's yours as well. And until then, guys, I'll see you in the next one.